Sir Thomas Malory was an English writer, the author and compiler of Le Morte d'Arthur. Since the late 19th century, he has generally been identified as Sir Thomas Malory of Newbold, Revel in Warwickshire, a knight, landowner, a Member of Parliament. Previously, it was suggested by antiquary John Leland and John Bale that he was Welsh. Occasionally, other candidates are put forward for authorship of Le Morte d'Arthur, but the supporting evidence for the claim has been described as no more than circumstantial. Identity. Most of what is known about Mallory stems from the accounts describing him in the prayers found in the Winchester manuscript. He is described as a knight prisoner, distinguishing him from the other 6 individuals also bearing the name Thomas Malory in the 15th century when Le Morte d'Arthur was written. At the end of the tale of King Arthur is written, for this was written by a knight prisoner Thomas Malory, that God sent him good recovery. At the end of the tale of Sir Gareth, and I pray you all that readeth this tale to pray for him that this wrote, that God sent him good deliverance soon and hastily. At the conclusion of the tale of Sir Tristram, here endeth the 2nd book of Sir Tristram de Lyonesse, which was drawn out of the French by Sir Thomas Malory, knight, as Jesu be his help. Finally, at the conclusion of the whole book, the most piteous tale of the Morte Arthur sans guerdon par la chevalier Sir Thomas Malory, knight, Jesu aide li per votre bonne mercy. However, all these are replaced by Caxton with the final colophon reading, I pray you all gentlemen and gentlewomen that readeth this book of Arthur and his knights, from the beginning to the ending, pray for me while I'm alive, that God send me good deliverance, and when I'm dead, I pray you all pray for my soul. For this book was ended the 9th year of the reign of King Edward IV by Sir Thomas Malory, knight, as Jesu help him for his great might, as he is the servant of Jesu both day and night. The author was educated, as some of his material was drawn out of the French, which suggests that he might have been from a wealthy family. A claimant's age must also fit the time of writing. Thomas Malory of Newbold, Revel. By far the likeliest candidate for the authorship is Sir Thomas Malory of Newbold, Revel in Warwickshire. H. Oscar Summer first proposed this identification in his edition of Le Morte d'Arthur published in 1890, and George Lyman Kittredge, a professor at Harvard, provided the evidence in 1896. Kittredge showed Mallory as a soldier and a Member of Parliament who fought at Calais with Richard Beauchamp, Earl of Warwick. However, a biography by Edward Hicks published in 1928 revealed that Mallory had been imprisoned as a thief, bandit, kidnapper, and rapist, which hardly seemed in keeping with the high chivalric standards of his book. Helen Cooper referred to his life as one that reads more like an account of exemplary thuggery than chivalry. Thomas Malory was born to Sir John Mallory of Winwick, Northamptonshire, who had served as a Justice of the Peace in Warwickshire and as a Member of Parliament, and Lady Philippa Mallory, heiress of Newbold. He was born after 1415 and before 1418. Judging by the fact that he attained his majority between 1434 and 1439. He was knighted before the 8th of October 1441, became a professional soldier, and served under the Duke of Warwick, but all dates are vague, and it is not known how he became distinguished. He acted as an elector in Northamptonshire, but, in 1443, he and accomplice Eustace Barnaby were accused of attacking, kidnapping, and stealing £40 worth of goods from Thomas Smythe, though nothing came of this charge. He married a woman named Elizabeth Walsh who bore him at least one son named Robert and possibly 1 or 2 other children. The same year, Mallory was elected to Parliament, serving as a Knight of the Shire for Warwickshire for the rest of 1443, and being appointed to a royal commission charged with the distribution of money to impoverished towns in Warwickshire. Despite the charges against him, he seems to have remained and in good standing with his peers. In 1449, he was elected as Member of Parliament for the Duke of Buckingham's safe seat of Great Bedwin. Mallory's status changed abruptly in 1451 when he was accused of ambushing the Duke of Buckingham, Humphrey Stafford, a prominent Lancastrian in the Wars of the Roses, along with 26 other men during 1450. The accusation was never proved. Later in 1451, he was accused of extorting 100 shillings from Margaret King and William Hales of Monk's Kirby, and then of committing the same crime against John Milner for 20 shillings. He was also accused of breaking into the house of Hugh Smith of Monk's Kirby in 1450, stealing £40 worth of goods and raping his wife, and with attacking the same woman in Coventry 8 weeks later. At this period, however, a charge of rape could also apply to consensual sex with a married woman whose husband had not agreed to the liaison. On the 15th of March 1451, Mallory and 19 others were ordered to be arrested. Nothing came of this, and, in the following months, Mallory and his cohorts allegedly committed a series of crimes, especially violent robberies, rising past 100. At one point, he was arrested and imprisoned in Maxstoke Castle, but he escaped, swam the moat, and returned to Newbold, Revel. Most of these crimes, if they occurred, seem to have been targeted at the property and followers of the Duke of Buckingham. Mallory was a supporter of the family of Buckingham's former rival, the Duke of Warwick, so there may have been a political motive behind either Mallory's attacks of Buckingham and others bringing charges against him. It is possible that Mallory's enemies tried to slander him, and there is evidence that the Duke of Buckingham was Mallory's longtime enemy. Mallory finally came to trial on the 23rd of August 1451 in Nuneaton, a town in the heartland of Buckingham's power and a place where Mallory found little support as a supporter of the Beechams. Those accused included Mallory and several others, and there were numerous charges. The judgment went against Mallory and he was sent to the Marshalsea prison in London, where he remained for a year. He demanded a retrial with a jury of men from his own county. This never took place, but he was released. By March 1452, he was back in the Marshalsea, from which he escaped 2 months later, possibly by bribing the guards and jailers. After a month, he was back imprisoned yet again, and this time he was held until the following May, when he was released on bail of £200 paid by a number of his fellow magnates from Warwickshire. Mallory later ended up in custody in Colchester, accused of still more crimes, involving robbery and the stealing of horses. Once again, he escaped, and once again he was apprehended and returned to the Marshalsea. He was pardoned at the accession of Edward IV in 1461. He was never actually tried on any of the charges brought against him, except at Nuneaton in 1451. In 1462, Mallory settled his estate on his son Robert, and, in 1466–1467, Robert fathered a son named Nicholas who was Mallory's ultimate heir. Mallory appears to have changed his allegiance by 1468. He had previously been a Yorkist, but he now entered into a conspiracy with Richard Neville, the new Earl of Warwick, to overthrow King Edward IV. The plot was discovered and Mallory was imprisoned in June 1468. Uniquely in English history, so far as is known, he was excluded by name from 2 general pardons, in July 1468 and February 1470. In 1470, the collapse of the Yorkist regime and the temporary return to the throne of Henry VI was followed by Mallory's final release from prison. Sir Thomas Malory of Newbold, Revel, died on the 14th of March 1471 and was buried in Christ Church, Greyfriars, near Newgate Prison. His interment thus suggests that his misdeeds had been forgiven and that he possessed them wealth. However, it was certified at the granting writing of probate that he owned little wealth of his own, having settled his estate on his son in 1462. The inscription on Mallory's tomb reads, Hic Jacet Dominus Thomas Malleri Valens Miles ob the 14th of March 1470 de Parochia de Monknkrby incom Waricini, meaning, here lies Lord Thomas Malory, valiant soldier. Died the 14th of March 1471, in the parish of Monknkrby in the county of Warwick. The tomb was lost when Greyfriars was dissolved by Henry VIII. Mallory's grandson Nicholas eventually inherited his lands and was appointed High Sheriff of Warwickshire in 1502. Alternative identities. There has been a great deal of scholarly research on the subject, but no candidate for authorship has ever been found to command widespread support, other than Mallory of Newbold, Revel. No other Mallory family contained a Thomas who was knighted who spent many years in a prison with a good library. In the entry on Mallory in the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, P.J.C. Field stresses that recent scholarship has focused firmly on Mallory of Newbold, Revel, especially because he was the only knight of the right name alive at the right time. Over the centuries, many alternative identities have been proposed for Mallory, in part because of the perceived gap between the crimes charged against Mallory of Newbold, Revel and the chivalric ideals espoused in La Morte d'Arthur. Some of the more popular alternatives are listed below. Welsh Poet. The earliest identification was made by John Bale, who a 16th-century antiquarian, who declared that Mallory was Welsh, hailing from Mallory on the River Dee. This theory received further support from Sir John Rees, who proclaimed in 1893 that the alternative spelling indicated an area straddling the border between England and North Wales border, Mallory in Flintshire and Mallory in Denbighshire. On this theory, Mallory may have been related to Edward Rees-Mallory, a 15th-century Welsh poet. Thomas Malory of Papworth, a second candidate, was presented by A.T. Martin, another antiquarian, in an article in the Athenaeum in September 1897, who proposed that the author was Thomas Malory of Papworth, Stagnus in Huntingdonshire. Martin's argument was based on a will made at Papworth on the 16th of September 1469 and proved at Lambeth on the 27th of October the same year. This identification was taken seriously for some time by editors of Mallory, including Alfred W. Pollard, the noted bibliographer, who included it in his edition of Mallory published in 1903. This Thomas Malory was born on 6 December 1425 at Morte Corbett Castle, Shropshire, the eldest son of Sir William Mallory, Member of Parliament for Cambridgeshire, who had married Margaret, the widow of Robert Corbett of Morte Corbett. Thomas inherited his father's estates in 1425 and was placed in the wardship of the king, initially as a minor, but later remaining there until within 4 months of his death in 1469. Nothing else is known of him, apart from one peculiar incident discovered by William Matthews. A collection of chancery proceedings includes a petition brought against Mallory by Richard Kidd, parson of Papworth, claiming that Mallory ambushed him on a November evening and took him from Papworth to Huntingdon, and then to Bedford and on to Northampton, all the while threatening his life and demanding that he either forfeit his church to Mallory or give him £100. The outcome of this case is unknown, but it seems to indicate that this Mallory was something other than an ordinary country gentleman. However, there is no evidence that this Mallory was ever actually knighted, and the very specific use of the word knight in respect of the author Mallory tells against him. Thomas Malory of Hutton, Conyers. The third contender is the little-known Thomas Malory of Hutton, Conyers in Yorkshire. This claim was put forward in The Ill-Framed Knight, a skeptical inquiry into the identity of Sir Thomas Malory by William Matthews, a British professor who taught at UCLA. Matthews's claim was met with little enthusiasm, despite evidence that the author spoke a regional dialect that matches the language of Le Morte d'Arthur. This Mallory is not known to have been knighted. Works. Mallory was most probably confined at Newgate Prison from 1460 until his release. He likely wrote Le Morte d'Arthur based on Arthurian mythology, the first major work of English-language prose. Richard Whittington, Mayor of London, was responsible for philanthropic work that allowed prisoners access to a library in the Greyfriars Monastery adjacent to Newgate. This, coupled with the probability that Mallory had at least some wealth, allowed a certain level of comfort and leisure within the prison. His main sources for his work included Arthurian French prose romances, Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, and two anonymous English works called the alliterative Morte Arthur and the stanzaic Morte Arthur. The entire work is 8 romances that span 21 books with 507 chapters, which was said to be considerably shorter than the original French sources, despite its vast size. Mallory was responsible for organizing these diverse sources and consolidating them into a cohesive whole. The work was originally titled The Book of King Arthur and His Noble Knights of the Round Table, but printer William Caxton changed it to Le Morte d'Arthur before he printed it in 1485, as well as making several other editorial changes. According to one theory, the 8 romances were originally intended to be separate, but Caxton altered them to be more unified. There has been some argument among critics that Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur was primarily intended as a political commentary of Mallory's own era. Mallory portrays an initially idyllic past under the strong leadership of King Arthur and his knights, but as intrigue and infighting develop, the utopic kingdom collapses, which may have been intended as a parallel and a warning against the infighting taking place during the Wars of the Roses. The seemingly contradictory changes in King Arthur's character throughout the work has been argued to support the theory that Arthur represents different eras and reigns throughout the tales. This argument has also been used to attempt to reconcile Mallory's doubtful reputation as a person who continually changed sides with the unexpected idealism of Le Morte d'Arthur. It remains a matter of some debate whether this was a deliberate commentary or an imaginative fiction influenced by the political climate. The sources of the romances that make up Le Morte d'Arthur and Mallory's treatment of those sources correspond to some degree with those of a poem called The Wedding of Sir Gawain and Dame Ragnell. They also both end with a similarly worded prayer to be released from imprisonment. This has led some scholars in recent years to believe that Mallory may have been the author of the poem. In fiction, a young Mallory appears as a character at the end of T.H. White's book The Once and Future King, which was based on Le Morte d'Arthur. This cameo is included in the Broadway musical Camelot, and in the later film, where his name is given as Tom of Warwick, thus supporting the claim of Thomas Malory of Newbold, Revel. In addition to T.H. White's treatment, many other modern versions of the Arthurian legend have their roots in Mallory, including John Boorman's film Excalibur. The discovery of Mallory's book and its acquisition by William Caxton form key elements in The Load of Unicorn, a novel for children by Cynthia Harnett.